So quite naturally, the last item on the agenda is the GraphQL client. So now that you've built a client server, sorry, we obviously want to try to call it from the client. And the first thing to notice is that GraphQL is actually running OHTTP. Because GraphQL is running OHTTP, we can call GraphQL as just another endpoint with whatever data that GraphQL requires. So I'll come back to which data GraphQL requires. It will show you something more about how to actually make requests in GraphQL, which I've only covered at a surface level, and then we'll just see what it's like. So any of these methods that you use to fetch Axios, RxJS, it might not be used to RxJS, can work. XML HTTP request can work. I mean, that's definitely obsolete by now, but very good. But there's a lot of boilerplate. There's always a lot of boilerplate, but I think there's more boilerplate by trying to do it with just HTTP. So I'm using ApolloClient. Seems reasonable now that I have Apollo server. Certainly reasons why I might not want to use ApolloClient, but I'm using ApolloClient. Now, yeah, I'll come back to those reasons. One of the reasons that it's nice to use ApolloClient is that next session I'm going to start with subscriptions, and ApolloClient is already ready for that. But I'll leave those considerations till next time. So let me just show you how what it looks like, because the way to learn what a query looks like is probably to see it. So this is a query. Now I showed you simpler queries, and they still exist. I can show you in the code that you can still use these simpler queries. But once you start using variables, you will need to find that you'll need to get stuff like this to work. So I said variables because that's what it's called when you call it, but in reality, of course, it's parameters. Right, so I designed the pending game to have a parameter, and I think you can get away with leaving the name out and all that stuff, but this is kind of the normal way to do it. It's also, as I will show you at the end, it's also something you can get automatically by a generating tool, and that would actually do something like this. So that's my query. Do note, this is a string. All of this I used the backtick to make multi-line strings. This is a string because there's no way you can get this to pass in JavaScript or otherwise, right? So it's a string. That's a bit unfortunate, but that's what we have to do. But this is how we deal with parameters. This is the important part. This is passed to this, that is then used here, right? And then in order to do it, we also have to define what are the parameters, and that's in the variables constant. And is it in a variables constant because that's actually what GraphQL wants. So when we do call, let's start down here. So what we're doing is we're making an object that has a query property with the string I showed you on a previous slide. It has a variables property, that's the object I showed you on the previous slide with the ID. And we make that into JSON, to a JSON string, and we post that to the URL. That's kind of the meat of it. All of this is sort of usual sort of usual headers. We're getting JSON back. So everything here is JSON. We're getting JSON back so we can get the data and work with them. There is some boilerplate code, the headers, that you have to specify the method, that you have to specify that you are expecting a JSON back and all that stuff. So there are some things here, but generally Generally, this is doable, right? This is doable, but you could also just use the Apollo client. So here's the Apollo client. So first of all, we need to set up the Apollo client. I don't know that there is less boilerplate because fetch is built in and Apollo client isn't. So we need to go, oh, we need to set this up in HTTP link and we need to set up a cache. You can't skimp on the cache, you need a cache. So you need a cache and you need all this stuff, right? So do notice I'm importing all of this from ApolloClient core. And the reason I do that, I should probably do something with that. The reason I do that is that ApolloClient is made to work with React. That's the default. And if you just do ApolloClient, you need to have React in your code base, which I'm using Vue.js. I don't want React in my code base, so then I can go and look up, oh, there's also an ApolloClient for Vue.js, so I can use that. But I am against it on principle, and that principle is the single responsibility principle. Calling the server and rendering the page are two very different things, and I definitely don't want those in the same part of my code base. So I want them separate. So I'm not doing that under any circumstances. So I guess that's what the people want, but I can't see that working very well in the long term. Everything can work in the short term, obviously. So, but at any rate, at this point, you need the /core. Otherwise, you will need React, and that's not what you have right now, right? Okay. So sure, this is a URL, and you need to set that up, and then you set it up in Apollo client. You only set that up once in the beginning of your file or something, and that's it. This is I've changed it since, but it was the beginning of my file. I have added something with subscription, so that's why it's a bit longer now. So this exactly the same slide. The queries and variables are not dependent on your choice of API. They are dependent on GraphQL as such. And then you can query like this. So I can query with the query variables, and I query with the fetch policy network only. I'll show you in code because I changed it back in code, but so this thing, async, obviously I am awaiting it. It returns object, and I'm not sure what's in this object, but I do know data is in it, and that's what we actually want, right? For the most part, this is the payload. So that's what we want, and what I'm doing here is I'm destructuring. Structuring is hard to spell. So that's the payload, and I'm destructuring to get out the data. So I could use result and say result the data instead, which I'm going to show you in the code. I give it, that's kind of the same, right? I give it the query, the variables, but I also give it a fetch policy, because you saw I was using a cache. If I don't give it a fetch policy, it's doing the default and it's caching. I don't know how aggressively, to be honest. I thought in my particular case, where you have a game that's changing all the time, I didn't actually want any caching. So that's network only. So this means no caching. So you can every time you're using this, you can consider how much caching you want and what your policy should be. So that's my Apollo client, and that's the last slide. Let me actually show you the code. So this is the code. You can see there's a lot more because now I have all the logic. But essentially, this is what I did before as well. There's a bit more things because of this beast here, which is some WebSocket for getting updates from the server, which we'll talk about next time. Otherwise, I make the HTTP link that you saw. Then I make a lot of stuff that has to do with using the same URL for two different things, but it can actually work. Here is the Apollo client that I showed you. Note that this is just everything just once in the start, right? So the moment I run and I import something from API, it just creates these things. And in-memory cache, and instead of writing these query variables fetch policy every time, I ended up making a function that does it, so we cannot see here in one place what we're doing. So I give it a document node. I'll show you the document node. But we're doing the query with a document node and maybe variables if it's relevant, which is an object, because you saw the variables objects, definitely an object, right? So same code that I showed you before. Mutate is doing the same thing, except it's calling mutate instead of query. So let's see what we can. That's some subscriptions. Let's wait with those, and let's see games. So games is, I think, a nice one to start with here, because this does not have parameters or variables, if you like to call them that. It has this: I'm getting everything from the games. I probably shouldn't get everything from the games. I probably should get only something from the games, but I ended up not wanting to do the work, to be completely honest. And then it just gets this memento. It's apparently it's an any, but yeah, because query returns promise any. So as I said, you don't need, if you don't have variables, you don't need to go through all this. You can just say games, and then I need that, right? But if you want a specific game, that's when you go through the entire rigmarole. You can see the GQL. I forgot what this particular phenomenon is called. It's a literal something, but what it does is it treats this as a special string. In particular, here it's a document node. So what you get out of it is a document node. It doesn't first make the string and then call a function. It changes the string. Some languages have that, and now so just JavaScript. Yes, so those are the two ways of calling it, right? Well, if I go to pending games, is where I actually did do something and decided I only have IDM players, and I'm also saying down here, yeah, it's an array of things that only have IDM players. And then in another place in the code, I call pending game to actually get the entire thing. I don't think I can show you much more about this. Yeah, I could show you that one. This one is nasty. So you can see here, if you recall, there was that nasty type called game that was either an active game or a pending game. And now we are here, and I am calling this new game, and I don't know what comes, if the game comes back as active or pending. It could be either, but it does depend on the parameters. But in general, I don't really know. So I need to say, well, if it is a pending game, I want these things, but if it's an active game, I want these things. That's rather big. I want to, and the rest there's nothing new. I want to show you then where I get these, because they're hard to write, admittedly, but you can get help. So let's look at that. I hope this is big enough. If I zoom any more, it would be completely squished. But what I have here is the Apollo server standard client. And if you look at the URL, if you can see that, it is HTTP localhost :4000/GraphQL. That's the exact same URL that I used both on the server and the client, right? It's my GraphQL URL. So if I get that call out from a browser and just call a get directly on that one, I get this, right? Remember, it's post when you want to do something GraphQL. Actually call a service. So this is now GraphQL. I have here an example query. I'm not all that interested in that actually. Let me just delete it. And then go and say, what can we do? You would note here, I am under root query. And it says, oh, I have some fields here. So if I want to actually get a game, I can get a game here and say, oh, this is my active game. And what do I need? Well, honestly, I think I want everything. So players, rows left, scores. On scores, I also want both slots, so that's everything. So I hope you recognize this from the code, right? This had a different name, but that doesn't matter. And then you can just go and say, yeah, that shouldn't be null, right? It should be 3 or something. I'm pretty sure if I run this, I get nothing. Yeah, I get no game because I don't think I have a game with ID 3. Do I have one with ID 1? No. 0? I thought I had one. Okay, I have one with 0. Okay. So so you can test it here, run it, test it, see, yes, that's exactly the thing I want. You can also see what the thing is that you get, right? So if you want, how do I code this? What do I actually get? Do note you get the data. That's why I did the .data, and then you get the game, which is this. So that's what you get, right? So this is the way to build it. If we go, I do wonder how good it is at this. I think I did it by hand, to be honest. If we go, okay, I didn't actually want to query. I want the mutation. I want the new game. I need to send both, of course. I want active game. No, it does it. And I want pending game. I might have done this by hand, and now I regret it. There are some things I don't quite have yet. Scores. Okay, I mean, at some point you can also just decide to write it, but why can't I? Oh, I need to go there. Okay. So an active game. Just go back to this on pending game. No, that was okay. Yeah, that was okay. So yes, these are big, but you don't actually have to write them. So yes, yeah, it kept the game ID from the previous one, so that's weird. We don't need that. But now I can say who's the creator. Me. It's JSON, not JavaScript. I have to remember that, and we need 3 players, whatever. I'm assuming it would work. No, it seems to. Yeah. So do remember to have that. Play with it. Figure out. Use this over here to actually build your queries, because this is a lot, and it's very easy to get wrong. So definitely use this over here to build your queries. Test it, see that it works. You can you can go and test it before you even think about the client. So very important. Very important to use that tool to get things the way you want it. Yeah. So that's all about GraphQL, at least until you try it yourselves. So happy coding.